Okay. I think a lot of people, this sounds like things people say, and they think they're like, so they think this is a gotcha, I guess. Let's see, I guess I could share the screen. Yes, I think the 10 Commandments are the law that you think is sin and death or condemnation and a bad thing. I think the law that they didn't obey that is now transferred to the heart is it the 10 Commandments? It says the law on stone is now on the tablets of the heart. That's what Second Corinthians 3 says. It's like this, the way people read 2 Corinthians 3, it seems to me, tells you what they are getting wrong about what the text is saying. If you think this is a got you, if you think 2 Corinthians 3 like proves Adventists are heretics, I'm fine with you thinking that, in the sense that I think, let's see, why isn't that coming up? I guess I'll just read it. So yes, this is a great example of what I think, what I think people don't understand. When they think they quote 2 Corinthians 3, it proves Adventists are heretics. So the Adventists and the Judaizers claim that the law written engraved in stone, called the law of condemnation and death, in 2 Corinthians 3, 6 through 9, is not against the person who breaks the Sabbath. Is not against. Oh, now just here's a food for thought, Catholic for sure. Insert any of the other 10 Commandments into your framework there. If you think the 10 Commandments, see, it's talking about the Mosaic covenant, and now there's the new covenant. It's a Jewish faith. Jesus is the same God as the Old Testament. It's not like Jesus is saving us from the Old Testament God. He's saving us from disobedience, because, right, the context is Jesus coming to his people to redeem them from the curses of the law, which is not the law is a curse. It's that them disobeying it and incurring the punishment for their disobedience to the agreement with God. That's what you don't get, because you're a replacement theologist. You think Jewish stuff is bad because you're racist, because you're prejudiced, and you've usurped the faith from its original context because you worship the Pope instead of Jesus, the Jew God who redeemed his people and established the church with a bunch of Jews. The entire early church without a pope, every single one of them was Jewish. And Jesus is the Old Testament God. You know, the faith that you say you have to believe the Trinity or God's going to burn you forever, that garbage, that is usurping the authority from Christ, putting it in your church. The fact that Jesus in the Trinity is true is the proof that Jesus is not redeeming them from the bad Old Testament God that had these Jew laws and hates Jews, because Jesus is the new God that hates Jews. No, you pervert. It's the ministration of death is the mercy of God for their justly deserving condemnation for not holding up the agreement and reflecting the image of God. You sicko, you anti-Jewish replacement theologian, man-worshiping pervert. Makes me sick. You think the law God gave them is ministration of death, and it's the law that's the problem? No, it's you that's the problem. The new covenant believer has the character of God exemplified in his commandments on their heart. And Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath, not the bad Old Testament God that Jesus saved us from, that bad Jew God who keeps this, who rested on the Sabbath. That's the creator who did that. Thank you very much. Jesus is that God. So, you don't know what you're talking about. See, this is Marcionism at its finest. Yes, I think the 10 Commandments is the law of liberty. If you were to walk in the commandments of God as intended, as exemplified by Jesus, you are in liberty. You think the ways of God are bondage. because you don't understand the Bible. And by the way, you're not in line with Catholic theology, like actual Catholic theology, right? The Council of Trent said the 10 Commandments are binding. Read it. I mean, you seem to have watched my videos. Are you not listening? The videos you commented on, I explained this. I showed it in Catholic documentation. You must not go to church or listen to your pope or whatever, because Catholic theology, I'm not even a Catholic. I just do a cursory scan on the internet. Like every Christian confession says the 10 Commandments are binding. Of course they are. Do not murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not lie. The Sermon on the Mount. You don't understand 2 Corinthians 3. Trust me. This is intense that people think 2 Corinthians 3 disproves Adventism. No, it vindicates Adventism. We're not saying we're under the old covenant. We're not Jews, are we? In what way? Like you just the continuity is not that difficult. The problem wasn't the law. You think the condemnation of death is the Sabbath? How absurd. Because right, you're not going to say any of the other 10 commandments, right? Is obeying the 10 commandments, which defines sin, is keeping those commandments? Is that the condemnation? Or is the condemnation because we didn't obey God? Like we hate people, we murder people, we commit adultery, we don't love our neighbor, we don't love God. That's what the 10 commandments is. How you love God and how you love your neighbor. It's covenant language in 2 Corinthians 3. The problem was they didn't have God's law in their heart. This isn't that difficult. Like people will not come around on this because it undermines, I guess because it makes Adventists right. I don't know. I don't get it. You are the epistle of Christ, ministered by right. So look, when people are under the law, in the context, it's people who are under the first covenant that aren't receiving the Messiah are condemned by the law. Those who receive Jesus and his mercy and forgiveness are transformed by the Spirit to be obedient to God's character, his law written on their heart. So it's the power of God to be obedient and loving and be transformed. And it's those who are not receiving the Spirit through Jesus that are condemned by Old Testament law, but they're rightly condemned by it. The law isn't bad unless you're pitting it against Jesus, who is that God who gave that law. This is critical. This actually is what's wrong with Christianity in a large degree, is not understanding this. Does the Trinity matter? Does the deity of Jesus matter? Why? Because he is the Old Testament God. And the problem wasn't God's law. The problem was our disobedience, our rebellion against that God who is the creator, who Jesus is one with. The believer is not under the law because they're under the law through Christ, because they receive the Spirit, which transforms the person and puts the law in their heart. That's the purpose of the new covenant. End of story. That's it. That is right. If you don't agree with it, you do work for Satan. Just letting you know. If you don't get this, you do work for Satan. And if you have a problem with that, we can talk about it, but that's my hill I'm dying on.